Shockwaves were sent throughout the world of men's professional golf on Tuesday as the PGA Tour and Saudi-backed LIV Golf agreed to join forces. There's so much to break down with this stunning news. So let's talk about it with New York Post sports columnist and golf guru. That will be Mark Cannizzaro. Mark, how are you doing with all this news going down today?
Well, Dexter, I mean, I am as floored by this as everybody else in the golf world, and that includes the PGA Tour players, the LIV players. Nobody knew about this, other than the PGA Tour commissioner and the Saudi, the leader of the Saudi LIV group. They kept this obviously extremely silent. There are just so many tentacles here, so many levels of things to talk about in terms of to me to me this ends the hypocrisy game really, and that's kind of my take on this. I mean, I felt like this whole battle between both forces was just a lot. There was a lot of hypocrisy involved, and it was bad for the golf fan. I think today is a win for the golf fan, because at the end of the day, if you look at what took place the last two majors, we saw the best players in the world competing against each other. We saw Brooks Koepka almost win the Masters, who's obviously is a LIV player. We saw Brooks then win the PGA Championship, 2 weeks ago in Rochester. We saw Mickelson, make a run at the Masters in April. Having these two tours divided and only getting a chance to see these players play against each other four times a year was, I thought, a loss to the golf fan. And so this is a win for the golf fan, but it's a loss on a lot of levels for some other people.
Right.
Most notably, I think some of the PGA Tour players who stayed loyal to the tour and didn't take the LIV money and are now sitting there going, "Oh, well, Dustin Johnson got $100 million and Phil Mickelson got $200 million. Now everybody's welcome back, and we're supposed to be one happy family again."
And
That's something that's going to be really being played out in the coming months.
And that's something we're going to get to and I want to ask you about later because I think that's rather fascinating. So let's start here, Mark. Let's go with this, right? Because when you look at this merger between the PGA Tour and LIV Golf, following the fact that both of these sides were in the middle of an antitrust battle, should we have looked at this as this was the end game that we should have seen coming all along? Is this the way this should have ended up?
Well, I thought this was the end game that I want to say I knew it was going to end this way, and I certainly didn't see it ending this way this quickly. But I felt like this was the only positive end game for the game of golf, and I felt like eventually one of two things was going to happen. This would happen, but not certainly right now because there was so much acrimony, or LIV would just kind of peter out. I mean, let's be honest, LIV's a big winner here. I mean, the Saudis and LIV are huge winners here. The PGA Tour caved. I mean, there's just no way. There's no way other way to look at this, because if you looked at it, LIV, they had essentially no TV contract. They had the CW, which I don't even count. I think they're paying the CW to broadcast their events, and they were in some places, they were being preempted by Buffy the Vampire Slayer. When those time slots were coming on, so they had no real public um, venue to show their product and sponsors and things like that. So you wondered how long the Saudis were going to be able to keep paying these massive guaranteed contracts with not a lot of return. But I think this just shows you how deep the pockets are, which we all know, have certainly heard about. It just shows you how much money the Saudis have because, they were obviously going to go in for the long haul. And I think Jay Monahan, the PGA Tour commissioner, and the powers that be at the PGA Tour realized that we can't fight this. And so they've joined forces. And I'm telling you, they're extremely unlikely bed partners right now, spooning under the covers. I mean, it really is a really odd dynamic.
Yeah, nobody saw this coming, as you said before. And when you talk about that, right, and the money, at the end of the day, Mark, when you look at this, it's hard to say that this deal isn't about money. So, how profitable is this for the PGA and LIV Golf? And you kind of alluded to this before. Is this merger good for the sport?
I think it's good for the sport just because we get a chance to see everybody playing with each other and against each other. Again, which I just never liked the division. To me, that was the biggest negative that came out of LIV was the divide. When you had these great players playing over here and the PGA Tour players playing over there. I think it remains to be seen. We've already seen the money that the LIV movement has brought to the PGA Tour players. I mean, these purses have been elevated by, magnified numbers. So the PGA Tour players have already been beneficiaries of LIV. as have obviously the LIV players because they got all their guaranteed money. So in terms of how much more money this brings in, it certainly will bring more money in, no question about it. The PGA Tour certainly would have jumped in bed with LIV if it wasn't going to be financially beneficial to them. But there's so many details yet to come out about this agreement, and I mean that includes the finances, includes how the tournament's going to be run. Will they have 54-hole tournaments like LIV has had? Will the players be able to play in shorts? Will there be music played in the background like they do at LIV? There's just so will there be no cuts? I mean, the PGA Tour already has some no cut stuff. I suspect there will be some of that. My suspicion is I don't think we'll see 54-hole events. I doubt we'll see that. But I think you're going to see some team element back, like into the PGA Tour, which the LIV brought in. And there's just so many details to follow here. But financially, everybody's going to benefit,
Yeah.
other than probably the golf fan that'll probably have to pay higher expensive tickets and the TV contracts.
Yeah, on the PGA side and the LIV side, everybody's going to eat. They're going to look to make some more money for sure. But you know this, Mark. There are going to be people / golf fans who look at how hard the PGA Tour went at LIV by banning any LIV golf defectors from competing on the tour. Does the PGA Tour look hypocritical here? It's hard to say that they don't.
Well, I think they look hypocritical. They look like they've caved, which they have, and I'm okay with that. I think I'm okay with it just as a sports fan and as a golf fan because I want to see all these guys play together. I've been on record on our air here and in the New York Post as I've never been caught up in where the money's coming from because I don't think any of these tours have ever really bothered to care how much where the money's come for, nor have the players cared. I mean, they've been Saudi funded events for years. Same with China funded events where the human rights, conditions are horrible. I just think that's where the hypocrisy game has been disturbing to me, and so I don't have a problem with what LIV was doing. I was not an anti-LIV person. I was not an anti PGA Tour person. I think I was kind of in the middle because I'm about what's best for the golf fan, and the golf fan at the bottom line wants to see these players compete against each other. So I think this is good for everybody involved there. But yes, the PGA Tour does look, especially what a tough guy Jay Monahan, presented himself to look like when all this came out. I mean, he was very, very, publicly, chastised everything about LIV and where the money was coming from and how uncomfortable the PGA Tour was about that and all those elements to it, right? And now all of a sudden, we're bed partners. I mean, it's really, I quite frankly have been on record in saying I thought that Monahan has done a terrible job with this for the start, and now he's in the full, and they've been in the full back pedal ever since LIV started. By all of a sudden they finding all this money growing on trees that they claim they never had, to elevate these events financially to appease the players who stayed with the PGA Tour, and now here we are, actually in business together. So yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating day in golf, man. It is really, fascinating. I don't know how else to put it.
A fascinating turn of events indeed. And Mark, you talked about the players that stayed with the PGA Tour, and there were some big name PGA Tour players like Tiger, Rory McIlroy, who reportedly turned down deals with LIV Golf. What will this merger do for the earning potential of PGA Tour golfers who are now going to be part of this merger?
Well, listen, it's obviously going to increase the earning potential for everybody. But what I am fascinated by as we move forward with this is you just mentioned Rory, for example. I know for a fact that Rory was offered, at least probably pushing $200 million, maybe more than what Phil got it, which was supposedly the highest, the $200 million guarantee number. Hideki Matsuyama, who is, globally, maybe not as big here, but globally massive, that was a huge get that LIV was trying to score, and he stayed with the PGA Tour. You're talking about easily, 9 figures for him that he turned down. And there's a lot of other players out there that are the same boat. I mean, I know Cameron Young was a kind of a local for us here in New York. I know he was in talks with them for a lot of money. They were trying to get some of these young guys, Patrick Cantley, Xander Schauffele, who I had conversations with about speaking about the conversations they had with LIV. These are all guys now that are having to welcome the Phil Mickelsons and the Bryson DeChambeaus and Dustin Johnsons and all these guys who have made 9-figure guaranteed cash that the PGA Tour guys turned down to stay loyal to the PGA Tour for their own reasons, and now they have to all coexist together. And to me, quite frankly, I think there's got to be significant, jealousies and ill will there on the part of the PGA Tour players. Rory McIlroy has been literally carrying the torch for Jay Monahan for 2 years now. He's been the man out front, and he's actually spoken in recent months about how him being so vocal and carrying that torch has taken away from his game because he's been kind of the spokesperson unofficially. So, and the other thing too is, and this is maybe too inside golf here, Dex, but Rory runs the Players Advisory Council. He's hot. He's a big figure in the PGA Tour's the PAC, they call it, the Player Advisory Council. And Jay Monahan is constantly thumping his chest about the PGA Tour is player run and player driven. Well, these PGA Tour players found out about this on social media today. So you tell me how much the PGA Tour is player run. That is a crock, and this just further shows how much of a joke that whole element is. And there's been already a lot of reaction on Twitter from players saying, "Hey, great to find out about joining a tour we'd never join. We said we'd never join on Twitter, on social media today." Yeah. I love Joel Damon had a tremendous tweet. He's one of the humorous guys in the PGA Tour, mockingly say, I always grew up as a big fan of the Four Aces, which is one of the team on the LIV Tour that Dustin Johnson is the captain of. And he said, I always grew up, being a big fan of the Four Aces. Maybe I'll get a chance to play with them on the PGA Tour one day. There's a lot of cynical stuff going out there, and there's a lot of pissed off players out there. There's absolutely no question about it.
Oh, yeah. Definitely seen it all over social media, the reactions from PGA Tour players to this. Last thing here, Mark. When the two sides were competing, talking about PGA Tour and LIV Golf, this was a polarizing issue for golf fans. Do you think the merger affects fan interest in the sport in any way? Could the sport of golf lose golf fans, or do you think that this merger will actually help to attract new golf fans around the world?
I don't think it's. Listen, there's going to be some people out there that are, morally against all of that the Saudis are about, and I totally understand that. But I really believe that faction is a very, very small faction. When you compare it to the people that are just fired up to see all these guys playing against each other again, and be done with this. I believe that LIV has drawn more interest in the game. And I think part of that is the us against them kind of thing. People like acrimony, that draws. I think that's a big part of the reason why the Ryder Cup is so popular, because there's so much kind of tension and, Europe versus US and all that kind of stuff in terms of just the straight up pure golf element of it. I have found that certainly when we talk about hits in our newspaper business and on the websites, I think the LIV stories that I and other people have written have gotten a lot of traction on the websites because people are fascinated by it and they're interested in it. And now that the two are merged together, I think it only greatens and heightens the interest. So I think to the quite opposite. I think this jacks up the interest in the game, and you're certainly going to have, and understandably so, some people that are morally against this, and I completely respect that. But I think the greater element out there are people that are more interested in the game and where it goes from here.
All right, we will see where it goes from here because, like you said, Mark, there's still so many details about this deal, about this merger, yet to be revealed to us, and we will see more about that, I'm sure, in the coming days and weeks. That is the great Mark Cannizzaro, sports columnist, golf guru for the New York Post. Mark, thank you so much for your time and insight on this. I'm sure we'll be talking about this again pretty soon.
Good talking to you, Dex. Thanks, man.